What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Primarch Purpose. It's been a while, but this is the series in which I take a look at each Primarch in reverse Legion order, giving you my thoughts on what I think their ultimate long-term goal might have been for them in the Primarch project, right? The Emperor created the Primarch project with a very specific long-term goal in mind. It's an immensely intensive resource project of his that only netted a total of 20 Primarchs, of which we know 18. So in creating these demigods of battle, if you will, and capability, he did so making each one bespoke, if you will, very much unique in their own way. Even if they share some common skill capability with others, they're still very much their own unique Primars, not just carbon copies of each other. You don't do something like that willy-nilly. You definitely had a plan. We never get to see this plan happen because the Horus Heresy happens, right? They get scattered before everything even starts. When they're in their pod still, and then once they're all reunited with the Emperor, basically, the Horus Heresy happens. So we never get to see the plan come to true fruition. So for the purposes of this Ramble series, we have a bit of a what if setting to establish. So basically, in order to look at this series, we're looking at a Imperial truth-driven Imperium with the Emperor alive leading it, following a successful Great Crusade. This doesn't mean that all planets are inhabited by humans. It doesn't mean there's no Xenos left. It just means the Great Crusade has come to a close for the next stage in the Imperium's life, you could say. So, Emperor alive and well, leading an Imperial truth-driven Imperium with his sons beneath him. His sons being the Primarchs, of course. They're alive and loyal to the Emperor, leading their legions still. So there'd be no chapters, just the legions. And with all this happening, that means no heresy. It also means no ecclesiarchy or its forces, no need for an Imperial truth-driven Imperium. It also means no Inquisition as we know it or its forces either, that role being taken over by certain legions. And everything else, more or less, can kind of roll the same way. You still have Chaos trying to be the big threat and the thorn in the side of the Emperor at every opportunity. We have Xenos forces as well to deal with. Dark Mechanicum will still be a thing, going too far that route. And Traitor Guard, things like that are either insurrectionists or get corrupted by Chaos. That can still happen. So not the only big change is that all Astartes are still Imperial, led by their Primarchs. So it's to this setting structure that we're looking at the 7th Legion's Primarch, the Imperial 5th Primarch, Rogal Dorn. Rogal Dorn is a really cool Primarch. I don't think he gets quite as much of credence as he deserves. I think he's kind of overlooked a bit. He is a very martially capable Primarch, very powerful Primarch, considered to be one of the greatest heroes in the history of the Imperium. And we don't hear too much about him. He died, ? Maybe it's ambiguous now. I don't know why it decided to become ambiguous now, but he died during the First Black Crusade, supposedly. The fluff was very clear in the past, right? We went from him only having a skeletal hand of his to having his skeleton in resin and everything like that, to now his death is so ambiguous that he maybe didn't die at all, and it's thought that maybe he'd come back, which I think is just absolutely weird because it just doesn't make sense to me, considering that he is not. It has his death be this ambiguous. Anyways, the Primarch of the Imperial Fists is probably the Primarch that has been closest to his true purpose set forth by the Primarch project that we've seen, right? Of all the Primarchs, I think we got the best potential look at what his purpose might have been. He goes by a few different titles, such as the Vigilant, the Unyielding One, and he was granted the title of the Praetorian of Terra by somebody you might have heard about, the Emperor. The Emperor granted him, honored Dorn by naming him the Praetorian of Terra, and took him to his side when he returned to Terra alongside with the Imperial Fist Legion. So the Imperial Fist, their Primarch, and the Emperor returned to Terra after the triumph of Eleanor and after Horus was crowned War Master. That's a pretty big deal because we have the War Master and now we have the Praetorian of Terra. The Emperor clearly sees or knows something about Dorn, obviously, because he made him. And we get to see kind of the true role of Dorn start to take shape. And then, of course, the heresy happens and it kind of takes shape in a vastly different way. So the aspects of Dorn are things such as discipline, duty, unyielding unyielding will. I was trying to say zeal and will at the same time. And he has quite the stern kind of exterior and stern kind of way of being, but also he's full of thunderous, as is described, zeal. Thunderous zeal. Not so much fiery zeal. What's the difference? Not much outside of fiery zeal. It's often associated with a lot more aggression, if you will. But Dorn is full of zeal. He's not a zealot and is not zealous, but he has zeal, and you could describe it as thunderous. You can even describe his zeal as fire, but it's important to note that he is not a zealot and he's not zealous. He just has zeal of a son who fully believes in his father's dream for humanity. That type of conviction might be a better word you could say, is strong with Dorn. So that's all important because he's the Praetorian of Terra, and as we know, post-heresy in a standard setting of 40k, the Imperial Fist, could also be described as the Sentinels of Terra. And discipline, duty, zeal, will is very important. When you are kind of the wall of shields, you don't want any section of your wall missing. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're defending and you break the enemy's attack and you rout them, you want to, of course, try to outright destroy them. But there gets a point in which you must be recalled back to your post to be ready for any type of hit and run counterattacks or any other type of threat to come to try to hit you when you're weak or hit you while you're occupied. And if you don't have the discipline and the duty to return to your post despite seemingly clearly being able to pursue the enemy further and destroy them, then that's not good, right? And while it might be viewed as foolhardy that you would obey the orders and return to your post, it is for the better, because the shield wall is not meant to pursue. In the case of the legions, there are other legions that do that. So it is trusted to Rogal Dorn and his legion to be that shield wall to return when required. And we see a really good example of this when the Imperial Fist fleet that he sends to figure out what happened at the Isfin sector and kind of reinforce the loyalists there once they hear about it, encounters an Iron Warriors fleet with Perturbo in it, with his flagship. Rogal Dorn is not part of his fleet, he's on Terra. The Imperial Fist fleet engages in naval combat with the Iron Warriors and actually is beating back the Iron Warriors fleet. It is achieving victory. It is winning. And then the recall order happens. Rogal Dorn's recall order finally makes it through to the Imperial Fist through the warp, and they receive the orders to return to Terra immediately. Of course, they want to rout the Iron Warriors, considering the bitter rivalry turned hatred they have for each other at this time. But orders are orders, and they ultimately follow them. It could be viewed as a little foolhardy, sure, because they take excessive casualties and damage in doing so, but they follow their orders because they are the shield. If they do not do that, who will? So that's a really good case of them following their orders. It's also a good case of one of their specialties, and therefore one. Well, not therefore, but we also see it to be one of Dorn's specialties. You could say therefore, I guess, and that is naval combat, void warfare, kind of naval sieging, if you will. The Imperial Fists excel at it. Their capability works very well with void combat. It's one of their strengths. It's one of the reasons why they got the upper hand of the Iron Warriors, because they are better at it. The Iron Warriors are better at other things, sure, but in that particular instance, with naval combat being the thing, the Imperial Fists are experts at it. Rogal Dorn himself is very adept at it as well. We saw this in the battle time period of the First Black Crusade, post-heresy, in the standard fluff, where he dies, but maybe doesn't die anymore. The actions still happen, but his death is now just ambiguous, and maybe he didn't die after all. Again, it's very weird. I don't know why they went that route, but they did. Irregardless, Dorn took 3 of his Imperial Fist companies and their naval assets, and with those 3 Imperial Fist companies and himself, launched a series of raids against the First Black Crusade's Chaos Fleet, crippling engines, sabotaging weapon systems, turning Chaos weapon systems onto other Chaos ships in the fleet with brutal boarding action, combat, and the like, and generally harassing the enemy, buying time. They were a much smaller fleet, but his sheer capability when it comes to naval combat really showed itself as they achieved their goal, right? So that is probably not what you would first think, though, for the Imperial Fist. The first thoughts for the Imperial Fist is siege combat, siegecraft, bolstering up defenses, kind of being the more defensive of the siegecraft legions, with the Iron Warriors being the more offensive viewed of the siegecraft legions. So that is true as well. All this comes together to be a truly martial defensive security type of force. Because not just land battles, naval battles as well are crucially important. Their capability to fight defensively, hit and run, board, and deal with boarding actions is very effective and works in very well with their more defensive siegecraft, if you will. All this combined with his unyielding will, his discipline, and his sense of duty, and his zeal to carry out any order his father gives him for the good of the Imperium of Man, leads to a frighteningly effective force. Rogal Dorn is nothing to sneeze at. And he would be a bit of a taskmaster as well, because he expects utter obedience from those he commands. His legion provides it. That's how it's shaped. And if he ever had to take command in a theater of warfare for defensive purposes, he would expect it from those he takes command over, which will lead to a very, very harsh feeling kind of overlord to non-Imperial Fist and even non-Astartes minds and such. So he's definitely not going to be winning any popularity contest, but he doesn't care. It's all about his duty. So I really think that we came really close to seeing his purpose properly. The closest we got was probably, that is actively written about, would be the Siege of Terra. He bolsters the defenses of the Imperial Palace, turning it into a formidable fortress that, while yes, ultimately does get breached, and and then the Inner Sanctum stuff breached as well, or the second layer breached, I should say, and stuff like that. It doesn't happen anywhere nearly as quickly as Horus would like it to. It buys precious time, and it's able to weather as well as it does the combined might of Traitor Titans, the Iron Warriors Legion, and basically virtually every other Traitor Legion force as well. While the Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, Custodes, and Imperial Army forces defend the walls proper, and the White Scars battle outside the walls. So quite a different kind of disparity of forces, you could say. And his defense is held up rather well. He was also the one, in essence, in overall command of the defense. So he's got a good strategic mind, a good commander, a good overseer, and understanding of logistics for defense and as well as naval capabilities. So, all in all, I think a pretty cool Primarch that we came really close to seeing his purpose really kind of showcased properly. But the heresy skewed everything. Even after the heresy in the standard 40k fluff, he has to deal with loss and grief and the fact that the Imperial truth has got twisted and slowly done away with, and that all taxes him and irritates him greatly. But still, he soldiered on. So that's basically it for Rogal Dorn. A very cool Primarch, a very capable Primarch. Don't forget, his martial capability is no slouch either, right? I won't go any further than that because I don't want to go on tangents. But he is a capable fighter. He is a capable commander, capable in siegecraft, especially defensive siegecraft, and would be one of the Emperor's advisors for all things security, like in terms of martial security. He's not so much anti-spy or cipher and code stuff, but when it comes to shoring up the Imperium, defending the Sol system, and then the rest of the Imperium at large, the Imperial Fist, led by Rogal Dorn, are going to be without peer in that regard. So, while their innate capability of sieging and stuff is important for that role as well, what I think really helps seal the deal is that in culmination with naval capability, all of which seals the deal because of their discipline, duty, and ability to follow orders, all kind of beaten into the Legion and made one with the Legion's viewpoint by their Primarch, right? Rogal Dorn is responsible for drilling that into his forces. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, all things martial defense would kind of make its way to Rogal Dorn in some fashion, to be an advisor, to directly oversee, to bolster up himself, to take over command if necessary, things of that nature. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comment section below on Rogal Dorn. I think he's a pretty cool Primarch. I think he needs to get a bit more respect than he does amongst the fluff community, but hey, he's still very cool, right? I really like this guy. Anyways, his armor, though, is kind of crazy. He's got the big Imperial Eagle wings on his back area there. Definitely not walking through doorways normally. Obviously, he's a Primarch, so he needs big doorways, and then with all the Eagle wing stuff, he would need an even bigger doorway. So, doorways and impracticality is kind of a theme with stuff in 40k, and we see it here rearing its head again. Anyways, thanks very much for sticking through it all. If you watched from beginning to end, kudos to you. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already to be part of future conversations like this one. And of course, share your thoughts. So until next time, take it easy.